So, namaste. Welcome to Satsang this evening. So, this evening, we have quite a few questions that have been sent in via email. So, I thought I would change the way that I do this just for this evening and make a start with some of these emailed questions. I am going to, there's 5 of them, so I'll start and work my way through them. But if anyone watching as well has a question, just feel free to raise your hand whenever you want to on Zoom. Slightly different to normal, and I'll see if I can alternate between a question that's been emailed and a question from someone watching live. So I'll start with this first question. So this one says, the question is related to my relationship with my mother. I'm finding it very difficult at the moment to know how to approach it. We've been through a tough time recently, and she worries constantly about me and still talks to me and treats me like a child rather than a 40-year-old woman. I can see her karmic tendencies as the root cause of these behaviors and can understand. However, it doesn't make it any easier to know what to do to strengthen our relationship. I can still see she is perceived to be causing a drain on this mind and body's emotions and the actions. And the actions I try to take to improve the relationship are not effective, or I feel helpless to take action because I don't believe she will listen due to past experiences when I have brought up my feelings, etc. Plus, she is very fragile and I don't want to upset her further. I would be grateful for any advice about this. Namaste. So, when a relationship is not functioning as well as it could be, it's always going to be some belief pattern that is coloring the joy and perhaps diminishing the joy and the smooth functioning of this relationship, which probably is also indicated by the actions that you have tried to take before to resolve this. Those actions you said here are ineffective and don't actually make much difference to change things. And when you have tried to say something, it's been rejected. So the clue for me here in what you've said is that you feel helpless to take action. So that speaks to me. We can always tell what the belief is that's coloring our experience of this relationship usually by the negative emotion that comes up. So a feeling of helplessness seems to be the justified response to this situation because you've been trying for a while to make it work, to change the way that your relationship functions. And our mind would say that you feel helpless because this relationship isn't going the way that you want it to. But in our awakening, as we come to see that we are everywhere all the time, that we are the one being which is everywhere, then it has to be that something inside of us, because we are the only thing that exists, there's only the one of us, and this karmic pattern is playing out between you and your mother. So there must be one belief that you're both holding on to and not being able to move forward into a much more smooth way of communicating with each other, let's just say. So what does this helplessness say? If you really look at this feeling, it feels like it's it feels helpless to try to change it, doesn't it? What does the helplessness say? It might be some belief that I can't fix this. There's no way forward. I'm blocked from doing this, or some sense that whatever I try to do, it is not going to work. So just really ask you to look at that helpless feeling, because you are so powerful. You're not a separate being. You are the infinite self. And if you are approaching this relationship with this feeling, then you're going to keep having that same experience. And all of us have come into this lifetime with these beliefs that we're carrying that are affecting everything we do in our life. And here is one area for you where it's really showing up. It's really beginning to play. The more awakened you become, the more your seeing deepens, the more challenging these beliefs are going to become. So if you've seen yourself to be the infinite being, to whatever degree, the self, the noumenon, the awareness, the infinite awareness, and also in this area in your relationship, you're carrying this belief still that there's just no point in even trying, some kind of deep feeling like that, then this is going to keep showing up for you. So the key to me is to, if your actions that you've tried to take are ineffective, there must be some belief pattern in the way. And those actions won't be effective. There won't be any clear communication until this belief has been seen through. So have a look at that. See what it's trying to tell you, this helpless feeling, and any other emotions that happen with it, any negative emotions. There might be some frustration if it's been going on for a while or something like that. And if you really stay with the feeling, it will reveal to you the core story, the feeling, the belief underneath this feeling that is showing up as this emotion, helplessness, and also as this lack of communication. And the belief, the emotion, and the physical manifestation in your relationship are all one thing. So the relationship can't really heal until this belief has gone, and it's just worthwhile having a look at that. So hope that helps you to move forward with that. And again, it's important just to say it's not something you're doing wrong personally. It's not, oh dear, I have this belief and it's screwing up my relationship. You are not a separate being. It's not your fault as a separate being. You are the one being, the noumenon, and this belief system is playing between you and your mother. You must both have it. So, okay. The next question. As a new listener, I've been listening to at least 2 of your satsangs per day for about 2 weeks. As a result, the question I'm currently asking is it true that I am not already the awakening self with a capital S? I love that. A lot of peace arises with this question, but I wonder if I am bypassing a lot of self-inquiry with this question. Thank you for your amazing teaching. So I wonder if I am bypassing a lot of self-inquiry with this question. So is it true I'm not already the awakening self? That's a very direct question. I love it. Straight to, do I even need to wake up? Am I not already that which is seeing itself clearer and clearer? And no wonder a lot of peace comes with this question. It's very, very direct. And I want to say really about this that if you need to do some formal kind of self-inquiry, then that will present itself to you. But this question is a kind of self-inquiry in itself, isn't it? It's really asking, aren't I, and really that is the final seeing that we come to from our self-inquiry. If I was to sit with the question, what am I with you? And eventually we come to this place, this silent, vast, expansive being that is already completely perfect and whole. Also, it's appearing as a human being asking this question. And the same answer we would get whether we ask this question that you've said here, or whether we ask the question such as what am I, or who am I, or even where am I, which is one we've used. So this is a kind of self-inquiry in itself. It's a kind of asking, what, am I actually a separate being, or am I not already this infinite being that is coming to see its own infinite nature? So this question is, it's as good as, and it's going to take you to the same place as a self-inquiry kind of question. And where you feel the peace, when the peace comes from this question, you may notice from time to time that some belief comes up, some negative emotion comes up, as well as the peace, to show you some belief where you're still feeling operating as a separate being, just to say, hey, can you look at me? This this belief needs clearing up. So I love it. It's a powerful question. Is it true that I'm not already the awakening self? And if you were bypassing something that you needed to look at, there would be some kind of manifestational evidence of that, something in your life, your body, your finances, your relationships, some mirrored evidence of something that you need to look at inside that isn't showing, or is only showing in an outer way, or some strong negative emotion, or a negative emotion that would be getting worse. So as a sign that there's something we need to look at that we're not actually looking at, if some part of our life is getting more dysfunctional, not working so smoothly. So I think this is the perfect self-inquiry, and it's obviously something, it's most important to find a question that really pulls you, that you feel is alive for you. So that is that's good, because you found this question that's producing very good results for you, and hopefully it feels alive and exciting. So yeah, wonderful. Good. Okay, so next, as I said, if anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand and we'll see where we get. So next one says, thank you, Helen, for your great teachings. When I started to think about my motivation for the seeking, I found that my reason is ending the suffering and having a better life, wealth, and relationship, rather than seeking the truth. Now I am thinking that this is egotistic motivation, and thinking that this may be a cause for not reaching there if my motivation is egotistic. Could you say something about this? Thank you again. Namaste. So pretty much everyone I've ever met has come to satsang, has found themselves in an event like this because they just want to stop suffering. And it certainly was that way for me. I'd heard about awakening. I read about it and thought that it sounded like some nice experience or something. But the real thing that drew me was just desperation, if I'm completely honest. I just could not live another day as I was living, or another minute even. I was in a great deal of emotional pain, and my life was pretty screwed up. And I didn't feel at all like I'd ever been at ease with myself. I was just scared all the time for no apparent reason. And I just eventually got to the point where I couldn't take that anymore. And I think if we had to wait for the desire for the self to recognize itself, rather than the truth, to stop suffering as a motivation to come to satsang, these events would be very, very quiet, wouldn't they? There'd be probably one or two of us sort of sitting here. But and the most important thing I want to say about this is, it's never just one or the other. You know, it's never just, okay, I just want to feel better and I want my life to just function properly, please. You know, I want to, it's never, you know, I don't care about my feelings at all. I just want to see the truth. Every human being is hardwired to want to feel better. And eventually we figure out somewhere along the path that the best way to feel good all the time is to see the truth of what we really are. So they're not necessarily two different things. And the deep and fundamental and deeply embodied awakening after seeing is going to result in having a better life anyway. It's going to result in not being able to run out of anything: money, time, patience, love, relationships, friendships, whatever it is that we feel that we've been missing out on. And that doesn't mean, we're going to suddenly turn into workaholics and start stockpiling money or something. It just means that we won't be able to run out, which is a huge thing, because we spend so much energy as separate beings worrying about things and thinking things over and all of that. So it's always, I've never found a single being that didn't have both of these motivations. I want to see the truth and I want to feel better. And we're only going to struggle if we try to pick which one of these it is. Most of us are more aware of our egotistical reasons for coming to satsang because our suffering is quite intense, usually by the time we arrive at some kind of direct teaching or even indirect teaching. So that may be the one that we're noticing most. But for me, it was quite amazing that when the intensity of the suffering had decreased for me, and there was a lot more peace and developing love and joy, that my interest in truth actually deepened. It was like the truth wanting to recognize itself even clearer took over as the chief motivation for that. And the egotistical motivations just gradually diminished, because the better you generally feel, the more sort of bulletproof you are as this awakened state manifests more and more, then there's little impetus to want to try to change things or feel better when you're feeling pretty good already. So there is no way, I have to say this because it's really important, there is no way to fail to reach this. It's really important. There isn't anything you can do wrong, like having the wrong motivation, because you are not a separate being, nor were you ever. And it is already the infinite self recognizing itself. And you can't screw that up. It's good news. It was tremendously good news for me when I realized this. There is nothing at all that can get in the way of your awakening. We can, of course, as human beings, swim against the tide quite effectively for some time, but that tide is still pushing us anyway. That current of our awakening is pushing us anyway. The truth is that you are the infinite self already, and there is nothing other than you, outside of you, different, separate to you. Whether you fully are living as that or not makes no difference. There is nothing that can stop you. And so hopefully that helps you relax. It's by the time you would even ask a question like this, it's already way too late to stop your awakening anyway, to slow it down. And even if somehow you did wander away from satsang, you got your happy life and you got your better life, and the impetus is not there so much to continue the search, the looking. We wander back eventually, because there is always that within us that wants to recognize itself. It cannot be other than that. And I've seen many people come and have a deep seeing and things begin to turn around in their life, and then the urgency has gone to continue their seeing, and they might disappear for a while, but they inevitably come back, because what really is pushing them is the truth wanting to recognize itself. So I hope that helps to guide that. You can't get it wrong, and you can't screw it up. This is the one thing as human beings that we can't screw up. We can do our best to delay it. We can hold it at bay with beliefs such as I'm never going to wake up. I'm never going to get what I want. I'm not worthy of awakening. Beliefs like this hold it in a holding pattern. And it's just kind of waiting there for the moment we begin to question this belief, the truth. But we can never stop it. The best we can do is kind of hold it like this. But that's not happening for you, I can guarantee. Lovely. Okay, so fourth one, we're getting through these. Okay, I've recently found your teachings and appreciate them so much. Thank you. I've been in a state of suffering and searching for most of the 66 years of my current life. In recent years, I feel very drawn to the direct path, but keep being pulled off by assertions of spiritual bypassing and various forms of healing methods and modalities, i.e., inner child healing, psychotherapy, changing my beliefs, and the various methods put forth for that, manifesting desires. I don't have anything specific aside from wanting freedom and happiness, etc., etc. The list is endless of the work that apparently needs doing first, and it's confusing and exhausting. And I don't feel I have time left for it all. Please, can you speak of this concept of spiritual bypassing? Thank you so much. So I'm assuming, I mean, I'm not 100% clear what you mean by spiritual bypassing, but from what you've written there, I'm assuming that you're talking about all this list of things that need to be done first. And I would, I experienced something very similar. Suddenly there was all these different things that, I tried, you name it, I tried it in order to try to heal my karmic patterns and all of that. It was massively unsuccessful. In fact, everything I tried made it worse, which you might have experienced as well. Because even then, the self wants to recognize itself. And this byproduct of healing, everything that we feel is wrong with us as a human being, everything that we feel needs to be corrected about us, all of that is washed clean, and seeing that there never was anything wrong with us. As the awakening deepens, that healing work gets done anyway. With reference to what you've asked here, it made sense to me, the more I looked at it, that all of these desires, all of these things that needed healing, all of these inadequacies and everything that was wrong with the separate being that I thought I was, and its train wreck of a life at that point, it became clear to me the root of all of that, everything, that these are all branches of a tree of separation, and the root is this belief that I'm a separate being. And it's not that I didn't have to work on those other things, but it just became clear to me that it was never going to heal permanently. I'd managed to get rid of a lot of things that just would eventually come back. Karmic patterns would come back no matter what I did. So I was eventually drawn to look at the root of it. What's the root of suffering? Like, what really is that? What is it that's sustaining this constant fear and angst that I was feeling? What is it that's not allowing the flow of abundance into my life? What is it that makes me feel unworthy? What is it that makes me feel angry at pretty much everything and everyone, as I was at the time? And it seemed to suddenly make sense. I was suddenly very, very drawn to very direct teachings and self-inquiry and all of that. So I think, well, you've said it here actually, that you don't have many desires except wanting freedom and happiness. So that says to me that you are already at this point. You are, if all you really want is freedom and happiness, then you're not spiritually bypassing. That much is certain. If if you were bypassing, you probably wouldn't be asking this kind of question at all. And for me, there were 2 points where this bypassing happened. The first one I've spoken about, where before I really got into the direct teachings. The second stage for me was after I'd had some seeing, some deepening of seeing that I was not at all what I thought I was. And there is this honeymoon period that comes after for most of us, where there's this peace and joy. And I think I had about 2 or 3 months of, well, I'm not a separate being, so all this is unreal, and I don't need to fix my life or anything because it's all unreal. I am not any of that. But eventually that I began to suffer again because I was rejecting looking at what needed to be looked at. So if your desire for awakening is pure, which yours is, then that will call you to keep looking. You won't be able to wander off. And I'd just suggest looking at the most direct way. If you feel time is of the essence here, what's the most direct way to come out of suffering? And, for me, it was to use self-inquiry to see what I really am, and then focus on that with meditation. And then when some belief came up in the way of me living as that, then I would use the contemplation techniques. And all of those are on the Core Teachings playlist on YouTube if you haven't seen those already. It seems to me that you don't need to worry. It seems to me that you're already looking at something very, very direct. Yeah, wonderful. And this teaching is about as direct as it gets. You are already that, and there is nothing other than you. And here's how to stop living as a separate being. Okay, so last question. Hi, Helen. Just felt to thank you for all of your wonderful YouTube satsang sharing. I live in Australia, so times are a bit off to join your live gatherings, I think. I pose the contemplation frequently into consciousness. What is it like to live as the awakened being? As I feel this is my final desire, and if any resistance to anything that is happening is experienced throughout the day, I just ask, again, directed at consciousness, can what I really am lack? Fill in the blank. Wonderful, wonderful. I suppose my question, that obviously comes from an illusionary separate one, is, does the fuel or momentum of the apparent separate self, apparent separate one, just run out when the time is right? And am I, as the separate one, sustaining the illusion of separation by posing the questions that obviously come from the reference point of separation? I hope these questions make sense. Lots of love and gratitude. So, first of all, the question is amazing. What is it like to live as the awakened being? That's going to take you right out of any assumptions you have about what it's like to be that directly, consciously, because we all are that. It's a question whether how conscious of what we are and how much we're living as that. So that question is very, very direct. And can what I really am lack, whatever it is? That's a very, very good question to challenge. And just the wanting to see, that's all that we need as human beings. A genuine willingness to see what we really are, and to see where we're living as a separate being still, without judgment. Without judgment. Oh, I'm living from separation there. No big deal. Let me just see if there's a different way to function. So, to answer your questions, the momentum of ego is already running out. It's already too late to continue to function, isn't it, just from the egoic perspective? That this sense of duality is just a sense. It's not really real. It'll always be here. Like right now, it seems like we're all on this session live and that there's lots of beings here. And yet It's just a sense. Really, there's only one of us. But the urge, the need deep down to recognize that consciously and to live as that is already very strong for you. And you don't need to get rid of that egoic drive. You don't need to do anything at all to ego except to see, without judgment, that what it believes is not true. So when we find ourselves telling ourselves that we're not good enough, or we don't deserve happiness or awakening, or that we're, life isn't fair, or whatever it is that we're saying to ourselves, it's enough to challenge that and see that it's not true. You never, ever will succeed at getting rid of ego, ever. It will just become less and less relevant in its perspective, because the ego functions in duality. It's a mechanism for comparing one thing and another, and it's very good at that. But as we see the one being that we are, the indivisible self, we see that more and more, then this mechanism that functions in duality, our egoic sense of self, is just going to be less and less relevant. We use this example sometimes that if you were to go and upgrade your phone, let's say your phone is due for upgrade, and you go into the shop and you look at all these new phones, you don't spend any time at all berating your old handset saying you are terribly wrong, you are bad, you should go away. You just buy a new one and you appreciate the old one, but it no longer suits your needs and you move on to the new one. And it's just kind of like that with awakening. And I couldn't even really tell you when my egoic motivations ran out, because there was more attention was going to what I really am. There's enough to see what's not true, isn't it? It's enough to see that's not true. Okay, what is real then? And to go from there. So kind of, yes, it will run out when the time is right, but you won't care by that point, really. It'll just be a little voice talking quietly somewhere in the corner of your consciousness instead of a loud voice shouting right in front of you, perhaps. The second question, am I sustaining the illusion of separation by posing the questions that obviously come from the reference point of separation? Well, I don't think that any egoic sense of self would ask a question such as, what is it like to live as the awakened being? I think our ego would be very interested in that question. It is the self asking that question, isn't it? It's the self saying, what is it like to be me? Like, what is it like to really be me? To really be my authentic self? What is that like? There's a curiosity there in that question, and openness. There isn't a separate being, nor was there ever. So it can't actually be coming from ego. I mean, I understand, of course, that some questions of more of a self-centered motivation from this separate sense of being that isn't actually. But I don't think that you need to worry about sustaining your sense of separation with this kind of question. It's coming from consciousness wanting to recognize itself, isn't it? It's not going to be very interesting to our mind to kind of ask these questions, perhaps till quite some time has gone past in our awakening. So they're good questions to check. It's good to double check, but also a question such as that wouldn't come from a separate sense of being. It's the self wanting to know, isn't it? There's a different motivation behind that question. It's a kind of inquiry question, a deep wanting to see. Okay. So, does anyone have any questions or anything that they would like to ask or share? If so, would feel free to raise your hand. I managed to get through 5 questions. Okay, we'll go with John first. Whenever you're ready, John.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
I can, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, that last question, what I'm hearing in your response is that the ego, a question could come from the ego here, but you're saying this question this is the self asking this question. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And so, in a way, I feel like a hybrid, kind of, part me, I, and then part noumenon, or itself, which is the self, which is wanting to know. It's saying, hey, wait a second, wow. See, I would have never guessed that. That's awakening. I mean, that's heavy in itself. I like that. So it is kind of like a hybrid, kind of like there's a part of me that's coming like straight from the noumenon, and another part of me that's I mean the ego. That's my question.
You might feel like that for quite some time, right? You might feel that there's a little bit of both there.
Huh.
Yeah. And because the old habits, the old way of seeing things, the old way of thinking might be there for quite some time. It might be still going around. The usual, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to wake up, all of that stuff. But hopefully they should become less and less relevant. It's more and more just a gentle shifting. Well, it was for me, for most beings as well, a very gradual, gentle shifting over of what we take our reference point to be. That the self isn't really interested in destroying the ego. It's just kind of, okay, what is real? It's a curiosity, it's an openness, it's a wanting to see. So you might feel a little, for quite some time for me, there was both perspectives going on, really. The ego would kind of, something would go wrong in my life, ego would say, why is this happening? And the self would kind of go, well, why is this happening? But it was kind of totally different energy sometimes. It was, I don't know if that kind of helps to answer.
Yeah, it does. And I guess over time we'll become better at distinguishing, right?
Yeah.
So,
And your body is perfect for that, because your body will tell you the motivation behind a question. If there's a tension in the body, it's usually coming from some assumption. So some belief we have about us. If I was asked to ask, why is this thing happening right now in my life? If there's tension there, my body feels tight and constricted with it, the question's coming from some belief talking more than the openness. And you probably notice that when you sort of recognize what's real about you, there's a relaxation in the body to some degree, or to a large degree, as you get more and more used to that. And that's what the body's for, first and foremost. It's to kind of, it's real-time 24/7 feedback about where you're kind of living from in that moment, and the degree of positive or negative states that we're feeling will also give us that feedback.
Good, thank you.
Very, very good question. Thanks. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Sophie, whenever you're ready.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you?
Very good, thanks.
Actually, I think you just started to address what I was going to say about the body.
Yeah.
Just
Never
now.
hurts to hear again, not to ask again, does it really?
Yeah, it's what's kind of come recently is this sense of happiness, that is my primary my primary goal, really, motivation, and that has somehow has made awakening a reality.
Yeah.
Well, I can't explain it very easily than that, because like other kind of senses of it seem too abstract, but suddenly it's like, oh, it's just this sense of being happy, which is what I really want. And like nothing else kind of matters in that. Yeah, it's so hard speaking to you. I kind of know what I'm trying to say, but I can't say it.
It's okay.
Really.
Inherent in the desire to wake up is an urge to feel good as well, isn't it? I mean, if awakening felt terrible, how many of us would be here? Really, still, not many of us. And there's
Well, it has felt terrible. It's felt consistently terrible.
well, I mean, the fully realized state. If that felt terrible, none of us would be seeking it, really, would we? If the end result was, okay, I feel miserable, rather than peace, love, and joy, then it would be quite different. But
yeah,
there is when you clear out even just a few beliefs, you begin to experience more joy as a regular thing, and more peace, and that just increases. So very quickly the motivation comes. I want more of this. I want this all the time. And I think in the end, I didn't actually care about awakening. It was like, I just want to feel like this, which is the same thing, really. But that's it's the recognition comes that we're supposed to be joyful beings. That we've spent so long living as a separate being that we've kind of forgotten that somehow.
Yeah, and carrying a load of disappointments and things where we that actually mask over that immediacy, that in any moment I can just, it's like that happiness is already there. I don't have to make it. All I have to do is recognize that it's there. And I'm still feeling that tension, which is, in that, perhaps, as you say, it happens as well, and it will be there as long as it is. But there's a sort of because I've always had this issue with allowing, what does it actually mean, allowing, and are you and to stop constantly looking at everything, because that seems to separate you even more. Like you're looking at it, and then there's this me looking at it, and then there's a kind of, what am I doing with it? Am I loving it? Am I not loving it? So all of that felt very
ego makes very subtle techniques out of all of these, like, doesn't it? Yeah.
So I've just had this sense of, from listening to actually Rupert Spira yesterday, about it coming, just letting it come close, come so intimately close, without having to sort of do anything, look at it, or just let it just be there. And actually I'm feeling a lot more relaxed, not trying to examine it in that way. And the tension is kind of, there's still tension, but it's maybe there's a sort of slightly more resting behind it, because I'm not constantly kind of like working with it in that way.
If you need to work with it, you'll know it will be becoming more intense, and you'll need to look at it perhaps more, but it's quite possible to just let whatever's coming up come up, and it's just happening inside you, this tension, this negative emotion, rather than happening to you as a separate being, isn't it? It's totally different. Like the self, the silence, totally allows anything to exist that exists. Doesn't deem it positive or negative or wanted or not wanted. It's just allowing it to be. And if it's persistent, then sometimes it's worthwhile asking questions around it and looking deeper. But it is intimacy. It's absolute intimacy with what is, isn't it? The authentic state. Whatever is, and that's what I'm showing up as in this moment.
Yeah, I think I'm getting more of a sense of that, rather than,
It's very hard to do that and not feel a sense of well-being. You're just letting what comes come, and you're not expending this tremendous amount of energy pushing against something, or all of that. And there's a sense of well-being that comes just from not from stopping doing that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's making me happier
Yeah.
than this kind of separation the whole time that I was creating by, pushing, trying to work with it or whatever. I don't know, trying to.
And you'll find, suddenly one day you'll be drawn to really asking a contemplation question, or you might feel really drawn one day to do some self-inquiry. Next day you might just want to sit quietly and not do anything spiritual. Next day you want to watch a funny movie, and the self has these kind of moods, these phases it goes through. So if something needs to be looked at deeper, it will certainly do that, but it's not coming from this egoic drive to sustain itself. I've got my to-do list of things I need to do, says ego, clear my karmic patterns, check. Oh no, wait, there's another one, and it goes on forever. So
Yeah.
Lovely.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Lovely, thanks. Is it Avishag? Am I saying that correctly?
Hi.
Hi.
Just trying to move this. So I'll just get right to it. When I was younger, I used to ask a lot of these deep questions, trying to understand the world, the nature of the world, and myself. And I would get stopped up with confusions, and I think they would come from the ego, and eventually it became easier. I got, I think, a lot of inner guidance to do this too. Is this purification, this deconditioning process,
Mhm.
and now it seems it's especially when a samskar is alive, which one is really present right now, it's harder to ask those kinds of questions because this pattern is so dominant to look at things. I'm able to look at them and know, like I can look at this pattern right now of being frustrated and angry at the world is a little, so I can look at this pattern and know and impersonally, but I can't seem to drop it to do something else. If I want to do the more spacious thing, I've just gotten so good at the deconditioning that I don't know how to do the other thing. And the uncertainty is, do I just keep doing this? Because as I do this, it's breaking things up and they are going away and I'm lighter and I get insight and learning. Will I eventually there will be nothing to ask, or there'll be sufficient release that I will just naturally go back to those questions for wanting to see deeper and understand, because those always were there, but I didn't know how to do it. And perhaps the stubbornness in me was getting in the way, perhaps, whatever. So there's this not sure about, is it also just that this pattern that's going on right now is trying to mess with me as they all try to do? And that's causing me to split things up.
You might find if a big or a pattern that you've had for a long time is playing, that suddenly there's a lot of focus around it, trying to go beyond it once and for all. That focus might stay on it for quite some time, and you might seem to drop sort of some self-inquiry questions, that type of thing. You might be totally focused on dissolving these patterns, which it sounds like that's what's happening for you, because if things are being released and let go of and you're feeling lighter, then that's obviously good, that's working. For me, there was a sustained period of interest in looking at these patterns when I could finally look at them without judgment, when I could finally look at them without blaming myself for their presence. They're just, okay, let me just actually look at them. And you might find that that's what's starting to occur for you. And it sounds like you've perhaps come into this life with this interest in the deep spiritual questions anyway, that you've had that bit sorted from quite an early age. I certainly wasn't asking, what am I, at 7 years old. It was, it just never occurred to me. I was kind of looking for something, but I didn't know what it was, so it probably is just that now you've got the wisdom and the space to really look at these things and allow them to dissolve,
Okay. Let's take a deep breath. I think one of the parts to this upset is that when I was a little kid, like 5 and 6, and I wanted to understand and I didn't know how to ask, and I didn't know how to, it was painful to not be able to know how to cross that bridge, and I became very frustrated. And I think that's part of the pattern, and that's just what it came up.
We kind of somehow end up in satsang feeling like we should know how to do this already. Like if it's what I already am, I should know how to recognize it. I should know how to release these patterns, you know, some sense of that. And especially as a small child, that'd be extremely I remember as a very young child having this feeling that you know when you've just woken up from a really good dream at nighttime and it starts to fade from your memory and you just kind of you remember it was really, really good, but you can't remember the content of it. It's slipping away. And I had this feeling that there was something I was missing out on or forgetting. And I just could not at all remember what it was. Or, I mean, that feeling disappeared after a while. And I just kind of sank into my teenager, you know, building my identity as a separate being. But you might find you had that as well. And there's that frustration then of trying to find that and not knowing how. And that sometimes that turns inwards upon ourselves of self-blame. You know, I should be able to figure out how to ask these questions, as you were saying, and that it just helps to realize that there's no, it'd be really nice if somebody handed us a book and said, welcome to this incarnation, here's how to figure out what you really are when you're ready, you know. You know, a self-realization for dummies or something, you know, it'd be good if, but it doesn't happen like that. We kind of stumble our way through into usually through intense suffering, don't we, to the deeper questions. So yeah. And maybe that's what's playing right now, is this sense that you should know how to do this. You should know how to ask these deeper questions or something.
No, it's not so much the should. I actually got more just mad at the world. I got mad that it wasn't showing up for me. Like I remember when I was 7 and I deeply, like, it was a yearning to have a teacher. I didn't know that was a real thing. So after a while, I was like, maybe I shouldn't do this because maybe I'm just hurting myself for no reason, you know. And if it was real, I would have continued. I would have, but I didn't know if I was making stuff up. So there was this conflict of not, like, I could do things, but I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. So there was this in between, and I got caught in not knowing which direction to be, and it was very frustrating. And I got mad at the world for not sending me help.
Awakening is challenging enough when you do have a community and a teacher and some way, some recognition of what's happening to you. You know, so as a child without any of those, it must have been very, very confusing to, you know, I was lucky enough to kind of have really read about or heard about awakening before I started to look for it, but sometimes it's the other way around for beings, you know, and then the process is understanding what's happening to them, isn't it? That will draw them to satsang then, to kind of resolve how they've felt all of their life, perhaps. Well, you're doing a great job, so give yourself some credit for that. Lovely. Does that help you to kind of relax a bit?
I think it helps me to understand what this pattern has been one of the hardest ones. And why am I mad at the world? Where's this coming from? And it's bringing clarity to what I'm experiencing. Because I feel like this is like, you know how the layers are on top of the layers on top of, this is one of the bottom layers of whatever this stream is.
Yeah. It's for myself, I was just angry at life and everything because there was this sense underneath that there was more to life than this, and I just couldn't somehow seem to find it, no matter what I did. Even when I found a direct path and teaching, and that it was quite some time before I could make it work in a useful way. You know, so it just kind of spilled out the side of this anger that it was anger at myself and, you know, everything else. It wasn't the way I wanted it to be, and you know, so yeah, it's a common thing. So I'm glad you've got this community though, and this help to come to. That's lovely. Thank you. Lovely. Thanks. And last but not least, JJ, whenever you're ready.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, how are you doing?
Great, thanks. My question has to do with the nature of the noumenon, and I realize that it's really difficult to use human terms to describe the undescribable.
Welcome to my life, huh?
Precisely. Excuse me.
Okay.
But what I like about your teaching is that it makes it very practical, very direct, and as you've mentioned, and much more, in a way, easy to handle. I like the dynamic between this noumenon creation and the little me here. There's an interaction that I've never seen anywhere else, although it's probably in every tradition. But here's my question. From what I've seen so far, the different exercises and so forth, the noumenon is always sort of in the background, aware of the awareness, watching the watcher, listening to whatever. So it's always sort of in a attentive position. And that aspect I find is kind of a passive presence. But my question is, there's got to be an active component. And this is what I would like to know. What does it want? What is its goal? What are its goals, if any? And I realize, again, these are human terms applied to what cannot probably be applied. But I think it really feeds this interaction. It would even better if I understood what it wants. If I may, one more little comment. I was listening to the interview you made with Caroline. And in there, you mentioned at one point that, the best thing that people can do in their lives is to awaken, because in so doing, they feed the world with their energy, with the presence of the noumenon, and they impact their entire environment and people around them. But most choose to remain quiet in so doing. Whereas you, the noumenon, I think this is what you said, the noumenon wanted you to be a teacher. So that struck me, because I thought, hey, this is an active element. There's a goal there. So I don't know if you can elaborate on that. I'm really interested.
Yeah, it's obviously, well, not obviously, but if we were to listen to the silence or recognize that awareness is present, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Yep, good. It doesn't have any goals there, does it? As its sort of first, in its unmanifest state, for want of a better word, it's not a state, but it doesn't have any. It's very passive, as you said. It's not doing anything. It's not even really creating the universe, so to speak. It just seems to be kind of arising out of it, like steam rises off of hot water. It's not pushing the steam out. It's just kind of happening, and that is really, everything is just happening by itself. But in the manifestation, which is not really different to the unmanifest, they're both the same one, but when it takes a shape, when it takes a form, it does then get some goals, doesn't it? And usually the first goal is survival of the form, and those goals those drives become ever more complex with the form, until it appears as a human being, where it has many goals and many drives and many desires, and the ultimate desire is it will use the human form, the noumenon, to recognize itself, to be able to. So it's one of those paradoxical things. Does it have any goals? Well, not really, no, because it's pure silence, infinite awareness. And yes, because it really wants to recognize itself. And both of those, this is very active. In the manifestation, life is always seeking to continue, to expand. Life always wants more. If you look at, if you left a field to grow, without cultivating it. It would grow everywhere it could. You know, nature grows everywhere it can. It's always expanding more, more, more. So is the universe itself, you know. So in the manifestation, it's constantly expanding and drive. There's always this drive towards more. And that is how we experience this awakening. More understanding, more deepening, more insight, more wisdom, more love, more joy, more peace, more compassion. It's always deepening like that, isn't it? There is this very passive aspect to it, this very yin type of stance. And then there's also this very active, which thing that we notice more with the seeking. You know, we really feel that drive when we end up drawn to satsang or something. There's something really pushing there, isn't there? Almost driven. Sometimes even feels obsessed. You know, it certainly did for me.
Okay, can I ask an additional question?
Yeah. Does that answer it? Does that give you some? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But precisely, my next question then is, so there is a strength there. There's a movement. There is a constant expansion. That's life itself. So when it starts playing a role in our own life is basically when we move out of the way. You know, the old saying, nature abhors a vacuum. I think that applies here, because if we stand out of the way, then the noumenon moves in. It's passive, but it is also kind of gently active in that sense. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and for me, it felt like I had to wake up and realize and come to live as what I know myself to be before these deep desires and goals could actually be realized too, you know, to make a difference in the world and things like that, and to be of service to others, and all the things that I wanted as a separate being but couldn't seem to make happen began to happen because there were no beliefs in the way of that process then. So these I had this idea that desires would kind of all fall away afterwards, but some of them came back even stronger because there was the tools and the resources then to do that. You know, a lot more energy, a lot more ideas, a lot more, all of that. So, you know, it's like the belief in being a separate being just becomes too limiting for it to play with anymore, to have happen what it wants to happen. It says, okay, I'm done with, you know, it being us, but I'm done with that now. Let me shake that off, and then I can get on with enjoying myself, so to speak.
Okay. Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Lovely. You're very welcome. Good to talk to you. Okay. All right. We will leave it there for this evening. Some excellent questions. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Namaste.